Now, probably most of us would agree that Eddie Murphy is probably one of the greatest comedians of all time. But his brother Charlie Murphy was one of my favorite comedians who is definitely underrated. Charlie Murphy. That boy was funny, man. In addition to his stand-up routines, he appeared in nearly 30 films, guest starred on small screen, and co-wrote screenplays for two of his brother's biggest movies, like The Vampire in Brooklyn and Norbit. You know, some call Charlie the best storyteller of all time. His stories about Prince and Rick James had people dying laughing, man. Chris Rock said that he was one of the funniest, most real brothers of all time. Charlie Murphy was hilarious, y'all. That boy was crazy, man. So let's get into his story, right? Now, Charlie Murphy was born on July 12th, 1959, in a hospital in Queens, New York, but he was raised in Brooklyn and Long Island. He was the oldest of two brothers, iconic comedian Eddie Murphy, and his little brother Vernon is the son from his stepfather. But, he was the oldest child from his parents. His mother Lillian was a telephone operator, and his father, Charles Edward Murphy, was a drugstore delivery man, transit police officer, amateur actor, and comedian. Now, by the time Charlie turned 5 years old, his parents divorced and they moved to where their grandma lived. But their dad would still come and visit and pick him and Eddie up. But growing up in Brooklyn, Charlie knew early on that he was a lot tougher than the other kids in the neighborhood, and he used to love to fight. He would especially beat up anybody that messed with his little brother Eddie, because if he didn't, then his mom would beat him up. Now, him and his little brother Eddie loved comedy, and they used to listen to Red Fox comedy albums, Richard Pryor, and Dolomite albums. Now, at the age of 9 years old, his father ended up being murdered by his jealous girlfriend. The story goes their dad had narcolepsy, which is the condition that makes people very sleepy during the day and can cause them to fall asleep suddenly. So he and his girlfriend had an argument, and afterwards, as he fell asleep on the couch, his girlfriend just stabbed him in the heart in front of the whole family. Wow. And she never was charged for it. That's crazy. After that, their mother ended up marrying their stepfather, Vernon Lynch Sr., who would raise them like they were his own children. And eventually, their baby brother, Vernon Lynch Jr., came along. But from an early age, Charlie said that he knew his brother Eddie was going to be special because he was always watching TV and doing impressions of the characters. He said Eddie would memorize the entire TV guide and would be in the mirror creating and imitating his favorite stars. Now, Charlie said he used to joke too. Charlie used to joke a lot too. And he would pick on people who had low self-esteem and make fun of them, and he used to pick on Eddie a lot. He said Eddie didn't take it well and would get mad, and he threw knives at him. He would throw irons at him, hammers and everything. He said Eddie would get so mad and start going crazy. Charlie would run behind the door, close it, hold it tight, and then Eddie would stick a knife under the door and try to cut his feet. Crazy, man. But he said Eddie never had to fight anyone in the neighborhood because Charlie was a bully and always had his back. But at that time, Charlie really didn't know what he wanted to do in his life. He was just getting into a lot of trouble. But then, in 1970, he ended up appearing in a movie titled The Landlord, which starred actors Beau Bridges, Diana Sands, Pearl Bailey, Lou Gossett Jr., and many more. Now, how he got in that movie? Well, they had shot the movie right in his neighborhood, and his mother entered his name to be casted, and you know what? His name was picked. He was one of the boys who was stealing hubcaps in the movie. So really, Charlie was in show business before Eddie. Wow. But still, he continued to get in trouble and suspended from school for fighting. One time he got suspended for hitting the teacher. And Charlie said another time, right, his math teacher paid him $100 to never come back to his class because he used to tease and make fun of him so much. Wow. Then his parents ended up buying a house in Long Island, New York. Charlie was 14 years old at that time, and that's where he went to high school. He went to Roosevelt High, which had a bad reputation at the time. And him being a new guy in the neighborhood from Brooklyn, other teens from Long Island didn't like him. So what he did was connect with the other teens that was from other parts, from the Bronx, Harlem, whatever. The ones that was outcasts who just moved to Long Island. They all clicked up. Chuck D from the Public Enemy group lived right down the block from him. And by this time, Eddie was 13 years old and was doing stand-up comedy, telling jokes at local clubs and talent shows. Charlie was the opposite at the time. He started smoking weed, he did acid, and started stealing. As far as fighting, Charlie could fight because his stepfather taught him how to box. He said one time he had gotten a fight and some guy pulled out a pistol on him, put it to his head. Say the guy put the gun to his head. When he pulled the trigger, it jammed. So he got lucky on that time. But after that, he ended up joining a street gang called the King Pythons, and more trouble followed him. Charlie stated that his mother saw him in a gang jacket and told him to leave the gang or she was going to kick him out of the house. So when he tried to leave the gang, his gang would chase him every day, and they were waiting for him after school every day. And he said the gang beat up all his friends and stabbed 2 of them, but they never got him. Then he was arrested for robbing a taxi cab driver, and he received 3 years probation, but he ended up violating his probation. And at the age of 18 years old, he ended up doing a year in jail. So after he got out jail, released from jail, he joined the Navy because the Army, the Air Force, and the Marines wouldn't take him because he had a criminal record. The only reason he got into the Navy was because when they asked him, does he have a criminal record, he lied and said no. Charlie was determined to change his life at that point, and he didn't want to go back to the streets. So once he got into the Navy, he became a boiler technician. And he said he experienced a lot of racism, but Charlie didn't play no games and wasn't going to tolerate any of that. He said him and some of the other black Navy crew members would be fighting at bars or clubs against racist people all the time when they would dock. Now, also, while still in the Navy, he came home to visit every often, and that's when his little brother Eddie was becoming popular doing stand-up. And one time while home, he said he went with Eddie to one of his shows to support him. And while Eddie was on stage, he said 2 guys in the crowd started hating on him and saying he wasn't funny. Next thing you know, Charlie Murphy approached them, beat him up. After that, Eddie blew up. He was on Saturday Night Live. He did the movie 48 Hours, appeared on the Johnny Carson show. He did the movie called Trading Places. He did his stand-up called Delirious, and etc. And that's when he told Charlie that he wanted him to be the head of his security. But Charlie had just re-enlisted for more years in the Navy. So then United States Senator Strom Thurmond wanted Eddie Murphy to perform at a private show for him, right? And Eddie agreed to do the show only if they let his brother Charlie out of the Navy. And once he did that, Charlie left the Navy in 1984 after serving 6 years and became the bodyguard for his brother Eddie. He was with Eddie everywhere he went. He said he was meeting a lot of famous celebrities, and Charlie said one of the craziest places they hung out was at Studio 54. Wow. And I heard stories about Studio 54. Charlie said cocaine was piled high on the bar like little ski slopes. And of course, people were having sex everywhere constantly. Now, another good friend at that time was Mike Tyson. They became good friends with, Mike Tyson at that time, him and Eddie. And he said Mike Tyson would show him some boxing techniques and stuff like that. Now, one of his favorite celebrities he met was Rick James, he said. He had met Rick James while Rick James was working on Eddie Murphy's album at that time. Rick James had did the song called Party All the Time, which ended up hitting number 2 on the Billboard charts. But it was around that time that Charlie felt that he wanted to be more than just his brother's Eddie's security. Plus, he said Eddie had a talk with him about always beating up people if they said anything about him. Charlie Murphy was crazy, y'all. Crazy and wild at that time because, see, Eddie didn't do no drugs or nothing like that, even though it was always around him and people will offer it to him, but Charlie did. Charlie did the drugs for him, and Charlie did not play no games. So around that time, Charlie wanted to get kind of focused. He needed to know what his real purpose in life was, and that's when he started writing movie scripts. And the first movie script he wrote was called The Peddler, which was about the notorious New York drug lord Nicky Barnes. And he sold that script to Paramount Pictures for $150,000. And he wanted his brother Eddie to play in the movie, but Eddie's management didn't want him to do it. And they thought if he do that movie, it might damage his image because he was doing Beverly Hills Cops Part 2 at the time. So that movie script, The Peddler, about Nicky Barnes, remains on the shelf still to this day. But Charlie stated that movies like New Jack City and American Gangster were kind of inspired by his vision and made Hollywood open their eyes. He was just way too ahead of his time with his movie script, The Peddler, which was 1985. Then, Charlie wanted to get into acting and he started auditioning for open roles. He said he auditioned for the show called Benson, but actor Robert Gilliam laughed in his face. Wow, that's crazy. 1988 came around. That's when he landed a role in the NBC TV show called Sunny Spoon, starring Mario Van Peebles. Now, he also tried to get into the music business, and he started recording some songs at Stevie Wonder's studio. A lot of people say they believe Stevie Wonder can really see, y'all. Charlie said while in the studio one day, somebody threw a frisbee and Stevie Wonder caught it. Wow, that's crazy. Now, here's the crazy part, though, about Charlie wanting to be in the hip-hop industry at that time. Charlie and Eddie's little brother, Vernon, is part of the group called K9 Posse. Wow, that's crazy. Who remembers the rap group called K9 Posse? Now, Charlie was helping with the writing and the production, and they did release 2 albums, but then they started having creative differences with Clive Davis and Arista Records. Now, after that, in 1989, he played Jimmy the Muffin Man in the classic movie titled Harlem Nights. That was Eddie Murphy's directorial debut, and Charlie and Red Fox became good friends on that set. In 1990, he played Eggy in the Spike Lee movie titled Mo Better Blues, starring Denzel Washington and Wesley Snipes. Also that same year, he was in a TV movie called The Kid Who Loved Christmas, which starred Cicely Tyson, Michael Warren, Sammy Davis Jr., Della Reese, Esther Rowe, Ben Vereen, Vanessa Williams, and many more. In 1991, he wrote another script. He had wrote another movie script called Campfire Stories, which was something like the Twilight Zone. And he had sold it to Paramount Pictures for $250,000, but they never released it. That same year, in 1991, he played Living Large in the Spike Lee movie titled Jungle Fever, starring Wesley Snipes, Samuel L. Jackson, and Halle Berry. In 1993, he played MC Gusto in a movie titled CB4, starring Chris Rock. That's one of my favorite movies right there, CB4. I can watch that all day long. You know, Chris Rock had called him up and told him he had a role for him, and all he had to do was act mean. MC Gusto, crazy, man. Now, in 1995, he did an episode on Martin, and he also helped write the classic movie called Vampire in Brooklyn. Wow. Charlie Murphy wrote Vampire in Brooklyn, and you know, he was very proud of the Vampire in Brooklyn movie because that was the first movie script he wrote that was picked up to be made into a movie. Also, that same year, in 1995, he was in a Snoop Dogg video movie titled Murder Was the Case. He got that role because Snoop and Dr. Dre loved him in the movie CB4. You know, while working on that Snoop Dogg movie, he would also meet comedian Freeze Love, who would become one of his best friends later on in life. But right after that movie, him and his brother Eddie, they had a falling out. Him and Eddie had a falling out with each other, and you know, they wouldn't speak for a while over some real petty, he said. You know, it got to the point that they would be at the same club and they would walk right past each other and not even speak. And it's crazy, they wouldn't speak for about 3 years until they both just saw each other one day, started talking, and they squashed their beef. And he would also take karate classes during that time too. Charlie Murphy got his black belt. He know karate too. Now, in 1996, he played saxophone man in a movie called The Pompatus of Love. In 1997, he married his wife, Tisha Taylor. Charlie stated that he fell in love instantly because the first night he met Tisha was on a boat and she was having dinner with her friends, right? So she didn't know who he was and he asked her to come with him. Her friends told her not to go, but she did anyway. And he drove her straight to his brother Eddie's house. His mother was there that day. His stepfather was there that day. Eddie was there. They were all in the kitchen. And he said he walked in and told them that she was his future wife. Wow. Now, in 1998, he played Brooklyn in Ice Cube's movie titled The Players Club, another classic movie. You know, he said Ice Cube told him that he wanted him in that movie. In 2002, he played Detective Johnson in the Dame Dash movie called Paper Soldiers, in which Charlie wrote that whole script to that movie, y'all. Wow, Charlie wrote Paper Soldiers. You know, that movie was Kevin Hart's first movie, y'all. That was Kevin Hart's first movie. That was his debut acting role, Paper Soldiers. Now, in 2003, he joined the Dave Chappelle show. Now, how him and Dave Chappelle hooked up, Charlie said Dave Chappelle called him up one day and told him he was a real big fan of his movies and the stuff he was doing. And he told him that he had a show and he had a role for a part of Tyree. And his name came up. You know, once he started, Charlie got on the show, but once he started telling them about the Rick James and Prince stories to the staff, they wanted him to make them sketches on the show. And that really helped the Dave Chappelle show blow up. That Charlie Murphy's True Hollywood Story sketches were funny, man. And Prince, Rick James, Eddie Murphy, and a bunch of other people who was there all confirmed the stories to be true. Prince really beat them in basketball and then fixed them blueberry pancakes. Wow. You know, Charlie said he had seen Prince after the show became popular, and he said Prince wouldn't He said Prince would speak to Dave Chappelle, they'd be talking and everything, but he wouldn't speak to him. Wow. So Charlie Murphy's like, forget him. He said the F word. He said forget him. But also that same year, in 2003, he was in another Dame Dash movie called Death of a Dynasty. Now, in 2004 is when he started doing stand-up for the first time at the age of 42 years old. And he started opening up for comedian Mike Epps. And check this, the audience used to boo him a lot. In the beginning, when he first started doing stand-up, Charlie was getting booed a lot, y'all. But once Martin Lawrence gave him the right advice on how to handle the audience, that's when his act started getting better for him. Also, that same year in 2004, he was the voice of the pimp named Jizzy B in the Grand Theft Auto San Andreas video game. In 2005, he was the voice character of Ed Wonkler III on the Boondocks. He did about 10 episodes on there. And he played in the movie titled King's Ransom with Anthony Anderson, Loretta Devine, and many more. Now, that same year, right, in 2005, he landed a role in the movie titled Roll Bounce, starring rapper Bow Wow. In 2006, he was the voice of an albino black graffiti artist named White Mike in Mark Echo's Getting Up Contest Under Pressure video game. And he also made a cameo as the taxi driver in a movie called Night at the Museum, which grossed close to $600 million in the box office. Wow. That's a lot of money. Now, in 2007, the movie Norbit was released starring Eddie Murphy. And guess what? Charlie wrote that script too. Charlie wrote that in 3 days. And Steven Spielberg read it. He loved it, wanted to make it a movie. And Norbit ended up grossing over $300 million. Wow. Charlie was the voice of Lloyd the dog in that movie. Now, that same year in 2007, he was in a movie called The Perfect Holiday with Gabrielle Union, Morris Chestnut, Cat Williams, Queen Latifah, Faizon Love, and Terrence Howard. In 2009, he released a web sketch comedy series called Charlie Murphy's Crash Comedy, co-starring with Donnell Rawlings, Jay Farrell, and Freeze Love on a streaming platform called Crackle. But also, that same year, in 2009, y'all, his wife, Tisha Taylor Murphy, died from cervical cancer. And you know, it's just sad because she died in her sleep just days before Christmas at their home in New Jersey at the age of 40. And you know, Charlie was devastated. He said his wife made her own funeral arrangements because she didn't want him to worry. She didn't want to worry him, y'all. Wow, that is sad, man. Rest in peace to her. Now, in 2010, he did 5 episodes on a TBS sitcom called Are We There Yet? That same year in 2010, he was in a movie called Our Family Wedding, and he released a stand-up special called Charlie Murphy, I Will Not Apologize, which premiered on Comedy Central. Now, also that same year in 2010, he played in the classic movie called Lottery Ticket with Bow Wow, Ice Cube, and a bunch of other famous actors. That's my movie too. That's a classic too. Lottery Ticket. In 2014, he had a major role on a show called Black Jesus as the character Vic, which is a classic too. In 2016, he played in a movie called Meet the Blacks. In 2017, he was in 5 episodes of the show Power, created by 50 Cent. You know, he played a prison guard named Marshall Williams in that. Also, that same year, he was on a comedy mockumentary television series called The Comedy Get Down with Cedric the Entertainer, Eddie Griffin, D.L. Hughley, and George Lopez. But on April 12th, 2017, Charlie Murphy died from leukemia cancer. And you know, His death shocked a lot of people because he really didn't tell anybody he was sick. He kept it private. He only disclosed his cancer battle to very close friends and family members because he didn't want his illness to define him. The staff from the show Power, they said they had no idea Charlie was dealing with cancer. But close sources say that he had been undergoing chemotherapy. His family and friends were shocked to hear of his death because his health seemed to be improving in their eyes. And at the funeral, a lot of comedians, they paid their respects to him, like Dave Chappelle came there, George Lopez, Cedric the Entertainer, Neil Brennan, Eddie Griffin, Donnell Rawlings, and many more. It's just sad because he was in the middle of a stand-up comedy tour with Cedric the Entertainer, Eddie Griffin, D.L. Hughley, and George Lopez, called the Comedy Get Down Tour. And, his family put out a statement saying, their hearts are heavy with the loss today of our son, brother, father, uncle, and friend Charlie. Charlie filled our family with love and laughter, and there won't be a day that goes by that his presence will not be missed. Wow. Charlie also has a podcast that is very, very funny, y'all. Make sure y'all check that out when y'all get a chance. It's on Spotify, Apple, SoundCloud, and all streaming platforms. And he also wrote a book. He got a book called The Making of a Stand-Up Guy. So make sure y'all support that when y'all get a chance. Great book. It's a great book, y'all. Charlie Murphy. Oh man, Charlie Murphy. Crazy, man. Underrated comedian. 57 years old. Rest in peace, Charlie Murphy.